I have heard you speak and I've heard you interviewed numerous times on the concern about race trumping merit, where it's taking us, and we've had medical people come and speak. Dr. Goldfarb from Do No Harm, talking about meritless entry into medical schools, and we talked about airline pilots and all sorts of serious professional areas. Let's open up with that, please.
Well, this is a reality-based group. You guys are used to hearing sometimes truth, but I'm going to give a trigger warning anyway. I'm going to speak about things that are very difficult to hear, and most Americans turn their eyes away from it. And let me also say, I'm going to be speaking about group averages. I am not speaking about any individual. You cannot make any judgments about somebody individually, whether it regards to academic skills or law and order, obedience, without knowing about that individual. But in order to understand why this cult of diversity is so dangerous, you have to know why it exists in the first place. If every group performed at similar levels of academic accomplishment, the college bureaucracy, nobody would have created these specious diversity positions. And they would not have created this religion of diversity that tells us that that is the most important thing about any institution, is the racial composition of it. The reason we have created this idea is because the academic disparities are so great. And unless we affirmatively seek out a particular mix of racial and ethnic groups, our institutions are going to be predominantly Asian and white. And again, I just can't say enough. I'm talking about the group averages, but the facts are the facts. And this is what you will not ever hear from the mainstream media. They will look at Harvard Law School or Yale Medical School or Goldman Sachs or the partner class of Covington and Burling, and they will say there's not 13% blacks there. 13% is the black representation in the US population. If there's not 13% blacks, this is a racist institution. It is discriminating against qualified blacks. Here's what they will not tell you. A lot of you, I'm sure, have children or grandchildren that have gone through the absurd racket of college admissions. So you're familiar with the SAT scores, I'm sure, the double score for math and English is 1,600. 800 is a perfect score on each. The Asian average, and this is just the average, their top scores are 1,600s across the board, is about 1,250 for both on a 1,600 point scale. The white average is about 1,050. The black average on both tests is 907. So blacks are scoring below 450 on their math SATs. This is very low. According to the National Education Assessment of Educational Progress, the NAEP, 66% of blacks, and again, I apologize for bringing this stuff up, racial etiquette would ordinarily counsel against it, but if we keep hearing about white supremacy, if we keep hearing that America's institutions are profoundly racist, we have to talk back with the truth. So again, I know this isn't pleasant to hear. 66% of black 12th graders do not possess even partial mastery of the most basic 12th grade math skills defined as doing arithmetic and being able to read a linear graph. The gaps never close. LSATs, Dr. Altman mentioned medical schools, the MCATs, blacks are at the absolute rock bottom. So in theory, nobody would be against artificially created diversity if it didn't involve lowering standards. But here's the rule. Any institution that is celebrating itself on diversity grounds has told you sotto voce that it has thrown meritocracy out the window. Because again, I'm sorry to say this, there simply are not enough qualified blacks to go around in our elite institutions. So why this matters? Because of course merit matters. Merit, excellence, the pursuit of being the best you can, of mastering the secrets of the universe is what has brought us this incredible building. It's what brings us hot water in our showers in the morning. It's what brings us every just magical transcendence of traditional human penury and poverty. And we are giving that up. And the sad fact is, we do this because we think we are helping blacks. It is just the opposite. If you take a black high school senior who's got, let's say, 1,000 combined on his SATs, and unlike any other racial group, blacks suffer this disability of being catapulted into academic environments for which they are not prepared. So that black with 1,000 on his SATs, which is a respectable score, it's fine. Instead of maybe going to Boston College or Boston University, and if there's any graduates, I'm not saying these are the end of the world, those are good schools. He'll get into Harvard. Harvard has its pick of the highest performing blacks in the country, and you know what? Harvard chooses every single one. It has to use racial preferences. Harvard's freshman class is averaged about 10% black. If it went on academic qualifications and did not use race as that thumb on the scale, its black population undergraduate would be less than 1%. So almost the entirety of the Harvard black undergraduate class is there because of preferences. So what happens to those students? Let's take this outside of the extremely charged, unpleasant topic of race. Let's do it as gender, because it exists there too. Cornell, its engineering department, if I'm a female applying there, I've got a 3 times better chance of getting into their engineering department than as a male. And that's not because I'm a better science student. It's because Cornell wants gender diversity. Well, let's say MIT admits me with 650 on my math SATs. What are my peers? It's MIT. They're all 800. They're all 800. They'd be 900 if it was possible. I'm gonna be in freshman year calculus surrounded by people who are ready for MIT. They're ready to take off. The teaching is going to be geared towards their qualifications, rightly so. And I'm going to fall behind. And look what happens. The diversity bureaucracy comes with open arms and says, Heather, you're feeling out of place here. You're not fitting in. You're falling behind. You're in a rape culture. You're suffering from the patriarchy. It's not your fault. It has nothing to do with your qualifications. You are in an environment that is hostile to females. And by the way, please demonstrate in favor of more diversity bureaucrats like me. Well, that's what happens to blacks. They systematically are at the bottom of their classes. There was a beautiful empirical study done at Duke that found that, tragically, more black male freshmen enter wanting to major in a STEM field than white male freshmen. By the end of the 4 years, there's no blacks left in STEM because they've not been able to keep up. Not because they're not capable of a STEM major, but because they've been put in an academic environment for which they are not competitively qualified. If instead of going to Duke, they went to a University of North Carolina school where they were matched, they'd graduate, they'd be able to go forward with a STEM career. That is the problem. It's both a problem of putting our own safety, excellence, competitiveness at risk, and it also has a deeper ideological problem. As long as this narrative that the only allowable explanation for lack of racial proportionality in any given institution is due to systemic racism, we are continuing to hollow out our civilization. We are laying the ground for more Zoran Mandamis who can get up there, has the gall on the 4th of July to talk about America discriminating against minorities today. That is simply a lie. And so, sadly, it's a bitter truth, but it's one that we have to use to fight back against this narrative that is so unjust towards America today.
This really is extremely hard to discuss, and it has to be discussed. You have written books on this, you know the numbers, and it's really appropriate for you to give us this information, and we appreciate it. Speaking of Mandami.
I'd rather not. We can all take that truth too here and think we're...
It feels like we've stepped in it in the United States recently. We have people running for office who are parts of the Socialists of America, or whichever, Democratic Socialists of America. We have, in universities, we have taught our students what to think, not how to think, and we have taught them about how awful our country is. And this is where the Democratic Socialists come in. I'd like your opinion, which I'm well aware of Mayor Mamdani, but more importantly, of the movement that is occurring now and what we are seeing taking over cities like not only New York, Seattle. I mean, Seattle has a mayor who is, God help us, and she's just beginning to get whiplash from some of her programs. But tell us maybe how we got there. Is it really a matter of there are more people who don't have than have in this country? Is this what democracy is giving us? Is our democracy successful? And how do we counter this other than obviously voting and talking about it?
Well, I don't know anybody in America who doesn't have. Everybody in America has. There is no civilization in history that is as prosperous as we are. By virtue, I don't care what your income is, and of course, anybody with low income is getting massive amounts of government support. Everybody. Food stamps, free medical care. But simply by virtue of our public health systems, the fact that our water works so well, we can drink water. We don't have to worry about that. We don't have to worry about infectious diseases. Of course, we decided we needed to for COVID to give the elites more power, but that's a different story. But the whole notion that this country is suffering from some fatal economic divide is ridiculous. Of course, there are massive differences of wealth, and they probably are increasing because our most successful entrepreneurs just keep on doing more and more. And thank God they're allowed, up until now, to reap the benefits of their visionary empire building. And it's an empire of consent. Unlike prior empires that required brute force to take over. And let me just say here, and I hope I don't get in too deep a diversion, and if I forget where I was going back for, you gotta remind me, Alan. Another thing that you hear about is not only we're a racist society, but we're a colonial society, and the West has gone around oppressing the third world other forever, and we've destroyed the prosperity of Africa, and we brought racism into the world. That is such BS. There is not a single group in human history that has not tried to dominate the other. The only limit is its technology. Slavery, we arrived to the slave trade late to the game. Islam was trading in black African slaves fiercely, making huge amounts of money. We were the only civilization that said, whoa, we have to end this. Britain spent 10% of its naval budget in the 19th century to blockade the west coast of Africa to try and persuade them to stop trading each other. It occupied Lagos for a very long time to try to shut the slave trade down. It's still going on in some parts of the country. So this idea that you know, we're imperialists is wrong. But what we do have empires, and they are empires whose power is based on one thing: making a product that betters humanity and that people want to have. They will buy the cell phones. They will buy the new cars. We get better and better in our mastery of nature, and that's the only thing that has given Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk their fortune, is that they have either responded to consumer demand or dreamed up new things that we didn't even know we could have and provided them. So what's going on with this disgusting display of lack of gratitude among the young people of the West? Who should just be spanked? I mean, they should go back to their parents and say, you raised them poorly, start over again. They are too ignorant, they are too blind about the miracle of this environment. And there's always unintended consequences for things. One of the unintended consequences about America's vast spurt in wealth post-World War II was we created so much excess wealth sloshing around that parents could afford to give their teenagers their own spending power. I don't know if we had credit cards back in the 50s, but they had a lot of money they could spend on things. And corporations, love them or, you know, be frustrated with them, they spotted a new market. And they said, aha, you know, here's all these idiots with dispendable spending power. We'll create the youth culture. We'll treat them as if they're gods. They're the center of the universe. So we had the rock music, we had the protest culture, we had the glorification of Woodstock generation and all of the paraphernalia, not just drug paraphernalia, but that was a big part of it. And that was a very important part, because through most of human history, humans were so poor that the group had to enforce norms of responsible behavior, bourgeois norms, deferred gratification, building up your capital for later. Do not just, you know, indulge, spend everything now, act impulsively. You have to control your instincts, and you have to be married before you have children because it's going to be too expensive for this community on its own to raise those children of single mothers. Well, come the 50s, and these baby boomer kids, I was on the end of that generation, they could go up to UC Berkeley and spend all their time stoned, and they're still okay. Their parents are still going to bail them out. That would not have been possible en masse 10 years before. And so these adolescents who know nothing about the world, they respond with such simplistic moral certitude. And I was one of them. I was a liberal by default. I remember thinking, oh, wealth is, it's zero sum. These people don't deserve it, because I didn't know anything. They became the center of the universe. The media catered to them, all the stories about the wonderfulness of the Woodstock generation. And when they graduated, they started going into universities, and they had the luxury of that self-righteousness of hatred. The fundamental academic approach today in universities, I cannot exaggerate this, is a profound suspicion of the workings of Western civilization, of the beauties of its literature, the wonders of its philosophy, the triumph of the scientific method, the greatest truth-seeking means ever developed. Thank you, the Royal Society of London in the 17th century, that started to really institutionalize this unique tinkering instinct that the West has maintained and gone with to try and understand the mathematics behind nature. This is extraordinary. But the baby boom generation took over universities, and they decided that America was the problem. The West was the problem. And so if you take a literature class in a university today, it may look innocuous. If you guys are doing your due diligence and actually following the curricula and syllabi of your children or grandchildren, which, believe me, you should be doing. I mean, there's some obvious things to keep them away from, which is the entire gender studies department and all of the whiteness courses and all of the, race oppression courses. But it may look like an innocuous 18th century literature class. It's not. It will be about why Tom Jones by Henry Fielding is really all about oppressing the West Indies. And you'll read with suspicion and hatred. That's true in anthropology, it's true in sociology. That is the dominant ethos. So Mondami is the end result now of decades. And I don't know if you followed his parents. It could not be more perfect. It's like this was written by Hillsdale College or some critic of modern academia. His father at Columbia University was second only to Edward Said, who gave us the preposterous notion of colonialism that said that the West derived its power based on oppressing the Muslim East, and that it was just simply one illegitimate conquest of another. Edward Said was their major star, and he transformed a lot of academia. Well, Mondami's father was just a little few baby steps in famousness beneath that. So he grew up, he set himself at the family table discussing American colonialism. So he is the perfect embodiment. And he now allows young people to have that invigorating whiff of righteousness that they believe they have discovered in justice for the first time, and they are going to spend their initially rhetorical power, but it's going to be more and more, as we've already seen, legislative power against the structures and the individuals that have given them this fantastic opportunity to play at being saviors to the world.
Since you mentioned Islam, how many of you were here with our 3 Muslim speakers last week? Really was an incredible event. These are 3 liberal, progressive Muslims who are trying to, first of all, protect Israel. The one from Toronto, Raheel Raza, 10 days before her talk here, led a demonstration of over 60,000 people carrying Israeli flags. Okay, and that's the kind of people we had here discussing Islamists and the concern about Islamists. But also, we talked a bit, and she gave us part of her discussion, was about the feminist organizations in our country. Our first Aspen Counterpoint some 16 years ago invited Phyllis Chesler to be here. Phyllis was one of the founders of the feminist community, the feminist organizations, along with
Gloria Steinem.
yes, all of Gloria Steinem and them. And she, who stood firm with forming these feminist organizations, is now completely ostracized by those groups. Why is she ostracized? Because she had the temerity, the gall to speak up against the way women were treated under Islam. By doing that, and also at the same time being supportive of the state of Israel, she has completely been ostracized. Also, she spoke out against the abject silence of feminist organizations in this country, which still exists, to the October 7th massacre that happened in Israel, the use of rape in war, if you would. And at this point, which we spoke about a little bit this afternoon, we have the concept of Me Too, which of course doesn't extend if you're Jewish or if you're from Israel. And I'd also like to get to where we are as feminists right now, as far as what we're doing as women to avoid being seen as sexual objects.
Well, the fact that every American feminist organization has not closed its doors and said, thank you guys, you did a great job, success, let's go home. The fact that they're still out there tells you that this thing, by now, is a scam. Let's leave aside for the moment the situation of females in the third world and Muslim countries. Because as Dr. Altman said, they're not looking at those. They're talking about American sexism. This too is another phantasm, as much of one as systemic racism. I'm gonna speak personally here, and in a country this large, there may be exceptions to this rule. But I can tell you, I have never, ever once been discriminated against because of my sex. I have been given every opportunity, greeted with open arms. The opposite is the case. I am given privileges, opportunities that, I'm sorry, any of your straight white male sons or grandsons will never have. They will be denied. Fox News once asked me to come on some panel to talk about interest rates. And I said, boy, that's suspicious. That's not my thing, finance. I said, are you asking me because you need a female on the panel? And they were actually honest enough to say yes. That is the case. Just as you should not, if you see something, an institution that's proportionally, a highly selective institution that is racially, proportionally diverse, look out. If you see a STEM field or conference that is 50-50 male-female, also look out. The fact of the matter is, and this got Larry Summers, who used to show up for the Aspen Institute and probably no longer is being invited, that got him fired from Harvard, among also a few other things, but this was his main offense, was to say that contrary to the dominant ideology in academia, which says that the reason that Harvard's physics department and chemistry department and math department are way predominantly male is not because Harvard is discriminating against the next Nobelist in physics or the next Field Award recipient in math, but because there aren't equally numbers of qualified females going in those fields. And he posited that there is, in fact, a difference in the distribution of high-end and low-end math scores. This has been confirmed again and again. If you look at the worst math dummies, the people that cannot count their fingers on one hand, they're overwhelmingly male. And if you look at the very top end of the people that are making the breakthroughs, it is overwhelmingly male. And there's also differences in inclination, in the drive to spend weeks on end until 3 a.m. in the computer coding lab eating cold pizza crusts because you're so determined that you're going to make the next breakthrough. Females have more options, they've got higher verbal skills. They're not there. I'm so interested now, if you look in the pictures of the AI new ventures, venture capitalism, the new entrepreneurs, they're all male because they have a disproportionate level of drive and obsessiveness to the point of being on the spectrum. And they're also crazy. I mean, you hear somebody in the middle of the night, doing the donuts and driving down 100 miles an hour through Main Street, you know the gender. Come on. These males are idiots. That's why they have a much lower longevity. They take risks, really stupid risks. But those risks also circumnavigated the globe and discovered how to master the oceans. They mapped the Western geology. There's a great chronicle by William Brewer, up and down California from 1860 to 1864. I'm a Californian, that's where my heart lived. He and his fellow, this was the first, the seed of the US Geological Survey. He and his partner, they would carry these massive, heavy barometers on their backs, hacking through 20 miles of chaparral to get to the highest point in the Sierra Nevada range because they were so determined to understand the topology and geology of California. That is the male drive. So these feminists that are going around claiming that any lack of gender proportionality is due to sexism are simply wrong. We still have these absurd philanthropic programs. If any of you guys are philanthropists, please check your portfolio. Do not be supporting Girls Who Code programs, which are based on the idea that if there's not proportional representation in the STEM fields, it's because of discrimination. I am amazed that those guys developing the latest AI model are still out there, because every signal is being sent against them. You are not wanted here. You are not wanted on the Cornell engineering faculty. You are not wanted in medical school. I know people whose sons have had the top MCAT scores. They've been rejected to all of their medical schools because they're white and male. You're not wanted here. And yet they're still going forward. So what the feminist organizations are about today is the grievance grift. They know that if they can make the case that females are discriminated against, there's going to be enough well-meaning donors and also, your sort of average female that is invested in feeling like she's a victim. And she'll keep those groups going because that's the message that they perpetuate again and again. And of course, if they really cared about female well-being, they shut down their shops in the United States and move to Kabul, move to Iran, move to other parts, move to sub-Saharan Africa, where females are still getting clitorectomies. The fact that they are not willing to look at that, and they develop, another twist on the idiotic idea of multiculturalism, which is basically anti-Westernism. There was a time when Ayaan Hirsi Ali brought the issue of female clitorectomy to the fore, and she challenged the feminist organizations. And so they had to sort of quickly come up with some specious explanation for their indifference, and it was, well, we don't want to violate other people's cultures. Complete BS. Either you care about female well-being or you don't. And the fact is, they don't. They care about their fundraising prowess.
Speaking of young people, I hear on a regular basis, something, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, we can't afford the housing, we're getting a raw deal as people in our 20s who have been indoctrinated in universities. Tell us what you really think about these young people and their complaints about not having enough.
What they don't have enough is humility and gratitude. That is a severe deficit on those young people's parts. Other than that, they are rolling in prosperity. Again, by virtue of being a member of America, you're a free rider on systems that were created before you and that continue to make life so miraculous compared to anything that human beings experienced up until the last 70, 100 years or so. But I live most of the year, sadly, not most of the year, about half the year in Manhattan in New York City. And I'm not a big user of Starbucks myself. It's great in the airport. But I will believe in what are we on? Is it Gen Z these days? I lost track ages ago, but the Gen Z penury, when I don't see young people walking around with Starbucks cups in their hands. If they can afford a $9 Frappuccino Latte Carocha. I don't know. I see this stuff now in the airports. I don't know what new variant on let's make something as sweet and caloric and dessert-like as possible and still call it coffee. As long as they're buying that, as long as they're engaging in the affectation of buying bottled water, and I can see in my apartment, you know, the poor Amazon delivery trucks pedaling along, delivering these massive boxes of bottled water, which is completely unnecessary. Our water is so clean. You don't even need to filter it, guys. You really don't. But if you want to, go ahead. But these kids are buying DoorDash. They're not cooking. They're ordering out because their lives are too important. I can tell you how to eat very well on pennies a day because I like to cook. I know how to cook. And if you really, really are starving, you can like buy dried soy. I mean, this is so preposterous. Like, it's like I'm talking about being back on the prairie or something. This is so remote from our lives at this point. But you actually can do this. You buy dried soybeans, you soak them overnight, and you cook them for a long time. And you can cook them with onions and green peppers and lots of olive oil and rich veggies. That would be a complete protein. And you know what it costs? Like 1 cent for a portion. The ground beef at my lousy New York supermarket, when I come to Irvine in the summers, my first place I go to is Albertsons. I love it so much. It is so clean. It is so orderly compared to the squalor of a New York chaotic supermarket. You can't believe it. But in my New York supermarket, ground beef costs $5 a pound. That's very cheap. So these people, they are not living lives of penury. If they were, again, they would be cooking at home. They would be cutting corners. Yes, real estate is very expensive, but it's possible to lay aside more money. You know, the Times even tried to make a virtue of this vice and ran a whole article on the things that young people like to indulge in just because it makes them feel good. You know, it's the new handbag or the latest $10 donut that is the hottest thing in Soho with the line going around the block on Prince Street. You know, they're gonna pay $10 for that hot new donut. So again, I am not particularly sympathetic to this claim. And of course, even if the claim were correct, which it is not, the solutions that are being offered are hysterical. Mandami says that government is the solution to these problems. Government is the cause of these problems. Rent control, controlled prices, government supermarkets. This guy's clearly never been to the post office. Mine is like being in the third world. There's trash all over. The windows are broken. Things are taped on with, or held on with twine. No service whatsoever. That he thinks that government is going to be a really good supplier of fresh food, and there's just one in each borough. It's all just virtue theater. But he actually thinks that expanding the size of government is going to make life cheaper and simpler and more abundant. It's just the opposite.
You know, it's fascinating with the World Cup and the fact that 5 minutes from now the USA will be playing. But with the World Cup and so many millions of people coming to this country, and we're getting to hear their impressions of being here and hearing people say, my God, I thought this was an awful place. Everybody carries a gun. And in fact, it's wonderful here. I mean, the portions of food, of course, that's why we have an obesity epidemic. They are amazed at what they're finding in this country. And it really does underline the success that we've had, instead of everybody talking about what a racist country we are and so forth. So let me ask you as a final question. There was a wonderful piece written about 2 weeks ago about the best birth control that has ever been utilized. And it's the cell phone. Your thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, people, I don't mean this as a criticism, but I've been told enough times that it may be true that the developers of software for phones have figured out that humans are very attracted to flickering screens. You know, it may be rooted in the savannah when they had to scan the horizon for movement, and it attracts us. And they figure out ways of delivering content very efficiently that does arguably, and I'm not an expert in this field at all, cause the brain to want more and more. I would, even if that were the case, I would say, so put the damn phone down. It is still within our power. Let us not say, oh, we're the victims of smartphones.
I just want to interrupt for a second. I have found myself on Instagram glued to the damn screen, going through one and the next one and the next one. And as you do it, they know what you want. And they just keep sending it to you. And you can become mesmerized by this. And just, I'm agreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah, well, you can be, but again, you don't have to be. Do we have free will or not? I'm sorry, and especially children. Any parent that is giving his child access to the web and to these devices before, I don't know what my age cutoff would be, because again, this is not something I've written on. Ideally, frankly, it should be through college, as far as I'm concerned. Dr. Altman said something, and I'm just gonna, this is very minutiae of sort of my academic philosophy that's way off topic right now, but I still feel like I've got to push back against this conservative trope, which is that the point of college is to teach you how to think, not what to think. It's really neither of those. It's to put knowledge into the empty noggins of these students. Content, knowledge, history, literature, philosophy, math. And conservatives have kind of had this, they don't want to be accused of Eurocentrism and prescribe a curriculum that, sorry, you guys are not leaving Brown University until you have read Plato, Aristotle, medieval romance, Renaissance poetry, Henry Adams, Trollope, George Eliot. You're not going to be, you're not educated if you haven't been exposed to the greatness of Mozart and the vision of Baroque art. You haven't been exposed. So to take refuge in, well, it's all about just debate and teaching you how to think, beware, because critical thinking is really an idea of the left. And when they use critical thinking, which we've started using, they mean, again, this suspicion towards our legacy. But again, we have free will. I would keep people away from it. They're great devices for as little mini computers to look things up. But in addition to birth control, I would say, again, this is something I'm just an observer from afar, this whole debate about lowering birth rates that is happening globally. My initial instinct, to be honest, I've got knee-jerk reactions to things that are too limited, would be to say this too is a result of feminism by cloaking males with this heavy stigma of toxic masculinity and also celebrating single motherhood, saying that males are optional appendages to families as opposed to absolutely essential to raising self-controlled, self-disciplined children, and particularly boys. And we have the idea that the strong women can do it all. That's just false. And if anybody has a single mother, daughter, or granddaughter, I'm sure she's doing the best she can, and she may end up succeeding marvelously, but the odds again are against her. The people in prison today, whether they're white or black, they are overwhelmingly raised without fathers. So I would have blamed feminism. But then I have to look at the evidence, and I see that birth rates are lowest in countries we don't necessarily think of as feminist, like South Korea or Japan. Bless them, I hope they stay that way, but they're still very low. And my hypothesis, and this is pure speculation, I don't have any empirical proof, is that somehow modern life, consumer society, is so seductive. It's given human beings things to do and freedom from the necessity of having large families, because now we have the government social safety net. So you don't have to have 10 children in the hope that one survives childbirth and young childhood, where people were dying off like flies in order to help you through your old age. That doesn't exist anymore. That a lot of human beings are saying, gee, I like my lifestyle. Children would cramp it. But it is a very strange thing that is happening globally. But it turns out, it seems like when you give people the option, the families get smaller and smaller, and children become, in a sense, for the upper classes at least, they become luxury goods. The tragedy of America's lower classes is the utter chaos of child rearing. My heart goes out for these kids that are growing up in the sort of the white trash Appalachian homes, where it's a complete, nobody's thought about having a kid, but they get pregnant anyway. And there's, one boyfriend after another. The kids are in completely chaotic homes. It's obviously 10 times worse in the Black community, where the out-of-wedlock birth rate is about 71%. That is cataclysmic levels of fatherlessness. So the family is breaking down, and but for the sort of the educated females, which is a lot of us, it just turns out, weirdly, they'd rather do other things.
Let's start with some questions, please. I have another mic. If you have a question, please. And please make it a question.
Heather, thank you. For many of us, every word you uttered was a breath of fresh air, and it has nothing to do with the fires or the smoke. But I'm curious, as one of the least openly politically correct speakers I've heard recently, how difficult is it for you to say the emperor has no clothes?
I don't give a damn any longer. You can call me racist all you want, and I don't care, because I want to preserve Western civilization. And my hope at the start of the Trump administration, and I don't want to get into Trump, but on these issues of identity politics, he's very good. And he's another person that doesn't give a damn. You know, he can speak the truth about third world hellholes, shitholes. That is true. And the media is gonna blow its top and call him a racist, and he doesn't care. And my hope was that 4 years of having somebody at the top of our country as a role model who basically his position is, you can't scare me from this, that it will give more people courage to stand up, to defend institutions so that your sons have an equal opportunity to go as far as their talents will take them, and that they will not cave in and roll over and play dead if they're accused of racism or sexism, and that more male CEOs are not going to be browbeaten by their damn feminist wives into pretending that they preside over a anti-female corporation. But I'm not so certain now. Trump has been trying to roll back as much of this diversity ideology, bureaucracy, and funding as he can. But I'm very worried that it's all going to come roaring back after 2028. As for me, you know, these are very, 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 very uncomfortable topics. And I just feel as long as we keep brushing them under the rug, the left wins, and that's really going to hurt all of us. So the truth will set us free.
As a female who came from poverty and became successful as a physician, I could not agree with every point you made more. And I want to thank you for being brave enough to say it. My question is, what do you think is the explanation for all of these elderly, middle-aged, and elderly white females who are out there protesting against immigration laws being enforced when they're probably the ones most likely to be a victim of a lot of these criminals who are let into this country? What is their problem? Because I do not understand them.
I know. I was out of town and I came back to New York City the day of one of the bigger turning points in the pro-Hamas hysteria on college campuses. The students had erected, it was so hilarious, this scene, I ran up there because I thought, I don't want to miss this, I don't want to miss this. The quad, Columbia is this wonderful Beaux-Arts campus. It's got this fantastic library with Corinthian columns, and the frieze is the names of the greatest philosophers of the West, Homer, Plato, Socrates, Thucydides, running around the top. And underneath is a quad, a grassy quad. And there were all these brightly colored, cheerful North Face tents erected. Couldn't really see anybody in them, with the line of faculty members in red, in orange safety vests around them, because the faculty had to protect the students against the racist NYPD cops, or probably not even NYPD cops, the racist Columbia University cops. University cops are the most pussy-whipped group of people you've ever seen. I mean, they're one step away from being defunded, except for the parents. The students are always saying, get rid of the Johns Hopkins police force, it's racist. And the parents say, you get rid of that police force, I'm taking my kid out of there. I don't want my kid in downtown Baltimore without a police force there. But, so there they are in their nice tents that have pizza boxes delivered to them thanks to the faculty, and like little massage hours and whatnot. And they were all chanting around the quad for 3 hours at a time, things like fags for Palestine, feminists for Palestine. And I saw this, I was one of the first to bring this up. It was overwhelmingly female. The chants, and you've seen it, go to any video of the 10/7 protests and everything since then, they're overwhelmingly female, very high pitched. And it's not just the United States. I listen to German media. I heard a coverage recently of another pro-Palestinian protest in Berlin. You can hear it, it's all the females. So, you think I've been politically incorrect up to now, just wait. One of the things that got the poor lamb, the innocent lamb, James Damore, who was a computer engineer at Google, fired in 2016, was Google, of course, was tying itself up in knots over the fact that it was not 50-50 female. And James Damore, in the spirit of inquiry, in the spirit of rational debate, these are Google engineers, they're rational, right? They can ask questions, they can answer, they can bat things around. They don't have a dogma, right? So James Damore wrote a 10-page memo saying, well, possibly, let's just consider this. Instead of increasing Google's diversity bureaucracy to go and try and find more females, maybe, just maybe, females are making different choices. And they are less willing to go into the coding world again, which requires just superhuman focus and isolating yourself. And females may have different orientations towards occupations that are more human related. On average, males gravitate towards systems, towards data, towards things that will allow you to succeed even though you're way on the spectrum. You can't read faces. You are very bad in your emotional intuition that females are much better at. And he got fired. And the other thing that he brought up that was the real coup de grace for poor James Damore, he said females score higher on neuroticism. And this was like the front page of the Washington Post and the New York Times and the Boston Globe. All James Damore had done was repeat something that has been known in psychology for decades. Psychology has the big 5 personality traits. Extroversion, competitiveness. One of them is neuroticism. And of course, there's neurotic males and neurotic females. Neuroticism is characterized by excessive worry, risk aversion, fearfulness. And there's lots of males that meet that standard. I would say probably every male college president is high on that risk aversion. But on average, again, I'm talking averages, I'm not talking about your granddaughter who will get the Nobel Prize in physics or chemistry. Females are much higher on the neurotic level, and for understandable reasons. They're great at raising kids. They worry about their kids. They're protective. And that is a huge distinguishing feature. And females are out there protesting Hamas because, on average, they're not quite as systematic in their thinking. They are more vulnerable to emotional pleas, and they are now taking things over. It's very worrisome. They're not able to think, well, if I'm for, as Dr. Altman said, people who use rape as a tool of war, as a tool of psychological control, how does that fit with my feminism? They don't make that connection. And they are highly susceptible to particular claims of victimhood. They're obviously not going to accept that white males are getting shafted, but they are very susceptible to claims that Palestinians represent this historically oppressed group, and that they can be screaming around their Columbia Quad under the watchful gaze of the people who gave us Western civilization and think that they are helping things rather than entering us into an era of profound irrationality.
I'm good. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. I'm going to ask one question because I'm going to ask Okay, great. I'm going to ask one question based on the fact that this is the Jewish Community Center of Aspen, and that is, how do you reconcile what has caused this emergence of Jew hatred? I won't call it anti-Semitism, it's plain out Jew hatred. And how do you explain, and this may be too broad a question, how over 30% of Jews in New York voted for Mamdani?
Well, that's the big question. And if you do, you're self-canceling. It's, I would say it's because the Jewish identity is so tied to the Democratic Party, even though he's not, and comes out of a seeing Republicans as oppressive and anti-Semitic, and they were. I mean, for sure, the Standard WASP was discriminating against Jews in the country clubs and the white shoe law firms. So what did Jews do? Say, okay, we're going to become so good, you discriminate against us at your peril. Or we're going to start our own financial firms. But that era is past. And somehow a certain percentage of Jews are not able to make that conversion and say, these people that you think are your allies, they hate you. Black anti-Semitism has been a strong part of that culture for a long time, and people turn their eyes away. The Middle East, you know, you're supporting this, right? They hate you, but the identity is still too tied to the idea that they support the oppressed, and they buy the simplistic explanation for who's oppressed in our culture, and that's really unfortunate. But I have to say, if this is who you vote for, sorry, you kind of deserve what you get. As far as the surge of anti-Semitism, it is the crowning glory of the American academic system, which is profoundly anti-Western now, and nobody embodies the success of the West more than Jews, who have given us so much of our scientific accomplishment, of our great industrial concerns, who have shown through natural experiments that it is not resource limitations that create poor countries. It's cultural limitations. They have taken a piece of desert and turned it into an extraordinarily fecund environment, both in terms of agriculture and in terms of industry, where all around them is poverty and squalor. And so they are hated for being the epitome of the West, and they're hated for their success and for undermining the victim narrative.
Heather McDonald, thank you.